understands that with Agile, we're flipping the triangle. So the typical time, scope, and cost triangle. So under waterfall, right, you would have a fixed scope. You would try to estimate things very precisely, those requirements. You would then estimate the cost and estimate the time. With Agile, what we're doing is we're fixing the team. So we're establishing whole standing teams. So as soon as we do that, and Scrum will tell you a team size is 7 plus or minus 2. I can tell you from experience that we like bigger teams, 12 to 16 people per team. And there's a reason for that. And I'm only going to cover Scrum today, not Kanban, but I have another talk on Kanban that explains why we need bigger teams, because we need more T-shaped people. But the point being is that we're going, as soon as we fix the team, meaning we're trying not to loan resources, or I hate the word resources, people, right, from team to team. Once we fix the size of the team, we've now fixed the cost, because the cost is the salaries of that team. Okay. We also are now going to work in 1 or 2 week iterations. So we're going to work in 1 or 2 week sprints, and so now we're fixing the time. So now that we have a standing team, we have fixed time. The only thing that can change is scope. Okay. So the predictability of what we're going to do, the estimates, right, which we're going to spend a lot of time talking about today, that's the only thing that can vary. So this is a fundamental concept to Agile, that we're flipping that triangle, and that estimation is not a precision game. And that's kind of, I think, the fallacy of waterfall is that people think that it is precise, that a creative process such as creating software is very precise. It's not, it's creative. So it's very variable. So we'll talk about how we overcome that. So we're going to talk only today about Scrum, not Kanban. I'm a bigger fan of Kanban than Scrum. So if you're not familiar with Kanban, you should study that. We do offer a free Agile Explain class. I think Jeff's going to be sending out to everybody. And if you want to go to the Kanban section, you could. But Scrum has some basic terminology, like we have a product backlog. So your product backlog is basically, call it your requirements, okay? We call them story cards in Scrum. We then take from that product backlog the requirements that we think we can get done in a sprint or an iteration, and we make that the sprint backlog. So we pull out the things we think we can get done in a 1 or 2 week period, right? We put them in that current iteration, right? And then we work from 1 to 2 weeks. I know this diagram shows 2 to 4 weeks, but Scrum even changed that a long time ago. Nobody does over 2 weeks now, because the feedback loop's too long. We have a daily stand-up or daily Scrum meeting where we actually talk about what we're doing and what we're working on. And the goal is that at the end of that 1 or 2 week iteration, we are now shipping working software. Okay, so that's the basic Scrum terminology. So product backlog, also known as story cards, right? Story cards are really what they are. They're index cards, right? Or post-it notes, right? And so they're actually, these stories are not tasks. So they are usually written in a format like this. As a user, I want this so that I can do this. So it's demonstratable business value. So as a user, I want to be able to log into the system so that I can gain access to the technology. Okay, so there might be a lot of tasks that go behind that story card, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to write this as demonstratable business value. Okay, and this seems really easy, but really the purpose of the story is to start the right conversation about how can we actually achieve that business value. And the business doesn't care about the task. They don't care if you need to create a database table, a front end, a back end. They don't really care. All they want is demonstratable business value. And so that's how we write stories. It's hard. It seems easy at first. And if you're new to Agile and you start writing stories, most people write stories that are really big. There's a rule called the invest principle, where you have to write stories that are independent, negotiable, valuable, estimatable, and small and testable. And usually when teams first start, they write a lot of large stories. And then as they start breaking it down in the backlog and release planning, they start to kind of split. And they say, wow, we could actually make that smaller and smaller and smaller. So how do you write stories that are really small, that are independent, right? So this is a craft. I wish it was that simple. We do 1 and 2 day workshops around just writing stories. But initially, again, people are going to write stories the best they can, and you'll mature over time. So let's get into kind of the whole point of this talk, which is how do we do really estimation sizing and backlog planning? So there's a concept in Agile called planning poker. A good friend of mine, James Grenning, he's one of the Agile Manifesto owners. James actually invented that. And he's been to the boat here. I've taught classes with him. And the way James described how he came up with planning poker is he basically was sitting in a room with a whole bunch of very smart people, and they had loads and loads and loads of requirements. And they were trying to come up with these precise, accurate estimates. And all these really smart analytical people sitting around the table were trying to come up with this, because they knew they were going to be held to it in a waterfall world, right? That whatever we say, however large or small we say this thing's going to be, how big it is to do, we're going to be held to that. So they would talk about one requirement for 20, 30 minutes, an hour, right? Then they talk about the next requirement for 20. They were all trying to pretend like what they were doing was very precise. So James at one point took a bunch of index cards and he wrote down small, medium, large, extra large, and double XL. Okay. And he said, okay, let's assume that a small card, extra small card is less than a day of work. And a small card is 1 to 2, a medium's 2 to 4, 6 to 8, and so forth. And he then wrote that down in index cards and he handed out, he created a set of those cards, and that's why it's called planning poker. They were like poker cards. And he said, okay, well, here's your cards. And I'll show you the lean dog cards. So here's the t-shirt sizes. Okay. And he said, okay, now I want the developers. Okay. And I'll talk about why only the developers. I want the developers to basically, I'm going to discuss the requirement. So as a user, I want to be able to log into the system so that I can do something. And now I want you to take your cards and just like poker, I want you to look at the size and say, wow, I think that's actually a medium size. Okay. And then the next developer would go, oh, well, I think that's a small. And then somebody else would say, okay, I think that's a small. So the developers would then put their cards face down on the table and they would basically do a poker flop. So let me just go to my live. Let me stop my share for a second. Okay. Can you guys see me? My front and center. Okay. So now that they basically have their cards and they lay them down on the table, they would do the flop and they would flip them over. It's okay. Wow. You know what? Jeff thought it was a medium. Amy thought it was a small, and John thought it was a small. Okay. So, wow, it looks like it's a small. Now, if we did the flop and somebody had something like an extra large, and then most of us had a small or a medium, we probably ought to have a conversation. Like, hey, Linda, why did you think that was an extra large? And then Linda would speak up. And by the way, you're doing this in front of your business partners. Okay. This transparency of planning poker is not just done by IT. Your business partners, your product owners are sitting in the room watching you actually do this. So they're realizing that by watching a bunch of smart people, right, do this estimation, that wow, even if, Linda thought it was an XL, John thought it was a small, wow, that's a completely different, scale. So clearly estimation is hard and it's not precise. Okay. So the value, in my opinion, of planning poker is the business hearing that conversation. And then Linda speaks up and says, well, you know why this is an XL? Because I just did something like this. And we got to think through the security implications. We got to think through some of the design things. There's a lot of ways we could solve that problem. And this is my knowledge about how I think I would solve the problem, and how Linda would solve the problem might be different than how Jeff would solve the problem. So it's the value of this whole estimation process is you're exposing to your business partners that a bunch of smart people couldn't even agree on how big or small something was, and it isn't precise. But so again, it's the conversation. I actually taught this planning poker. I was teaching a class with James, and I said, great, the creator of planning poker is going to explain this. And he goes, no, I want to hear you tell the story, not me. So I told the story. And I said, to me, the most valuable part of this whole thing was the conversation about, how hard it is as a creative person to actually predict something. And so the conversation is valuable. And James like, oh, that's funny. He goes, I actually invented planning poker to get people to shut up. He said that there was so much analytical debate over something that was not precise. The whole point was we were talking too much. And so most of the time when you do planning poker, you'll come out right. So again, the way this works, you have your product owner, business analyst. They're sitting in a room. They're talking about the user story card. They're saying, as a user, I want this so that I can do this. Developers, testers, everybody is in the room. The entire team is in this planning game. but the estimation is actually done by the developers. And I'll come back to that as to why only the developers. So they'll read the card. Everybody will take their cards. They'll do the thing. We'll do the flop. It's okay. We start to get a stack of cards, and I'll try to do this virtually. So now I have a bunch of small cards. These are all kind of medium cards. These are large cards. Okay, so now we've established kind of the size of things, and we've done this in front of the business. Now what we need to do is apply a point value to it. So we take all the extra small cards and we say, okay, that's worth 1 point. Okay, we take the small cards and we say it's worth 2 points. We take the medium cards worth 4. If you notice, we're doubling the point value for each t-shirt size. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16. The reason we're doubling the size of the points is that indicate that's risk, right? If something's really easy to do, then it's there's less risk that's going to grow on you. If something's extra large to do, there's a chance that it's going to grow in scope. So the reason we do that is account for that. So for example, the analogy I could use would be if I'm digging a hole, right? That's pretty precise. I can probably look around. There's no trees, no roots. Okay, probably predict how long that might take. If I'm going to dig a ditch, okay, there's a lot more uncertainty in doing something big, right? If it's harder and more complex, there's more chances that we're not going to be that precise in sizing things. So we double the points kind of for risk. So now that I have the cards, okay, laid out, and I know the small, the medium, usually in the bottom of this card, I'll put the size of the card. So you can see an extra large is a 16, right? A large is an 8, okay? So we actually put the point value in the side. So now that we've established kind of the relative size of things, and humans are much better at judging the size of things than being precision on ours. It's kind of like, is it a Chihuahua, or a Great Dane or a Bulldog, right? Completely different sizes. So when it comes down to t-shirt sizes, it's a lot. All we're trying to do is we're trying to tell our business partners, wow, that's extra large and that's extra small. So I have a budget. My budget is I have a 2-week time. I have a fixed team that can work on this thing, and they can solve so many problems in a week. They can only achieve so much business value in a given period. So I have to make a decision. Do I want 10 extra smalls or 1 extra large? Do I want calzones or do I want an extra large pizza, right? Or do I want breadsticks and 2 calzones? So the whole point, right, is we're trying to show the business that, this isn't a precision game. We have only 5 orders of magnitude of problem solving here, and we can only solve so many problems in a given period. Okay.
So hey, Jeff, I actually had the same question someone else, Greg did. Doubling the points, yep, versus Fibonacci.
Yeah, so that's a great one. So Fibonacci, was it Sutherland that created it? It sounds really good. We never practiced that. It came out in a book, and it sounded. I think Fibonacci sounds like a really good thing. James Grenning himself will tell you that's way too many orders of magnitude, right? We don't use it. We use t-shirt sizes, and we use even points because it's easier to do the math. And again, having all those. I mean, how many are there in Fibonacci? I actually have it in my slide deck here. There's what? 0, I can't even remember. 1, 3, 7, all those 3, 6, 9, 11 degrees of complexity, right? That's just way too many. T-shirts are plenty for us, and it's always worked. And it's hard for me to say, wow, is something infinity or a 1 or a 3 or a 7 versus, wow, is it an extra large, small, medium, right? Even our business can relate to that. When you start using Fibonacci, I think your customers look at it and say, wow, we look at all this precision. Like Fibonacci, it sounds like they have this scientific equation, right? And how to do estimation. And it's not that, what we do is a lot simpler. It's a lot less precise. We're knowledge workers, and it's a creative process. I tell people that writing code could be like writing an email. If I have to write a really important email, I could take 8 hours to do it, or I could take 2 minutes, right? I could overanalyze it, keep refactoring it, changing it, doing it. Well, so because that's a creative process, communication, right? So it's no different than writing code. Okay, so now that we have a bunch of story cards, I'm going to try to make sure you guys can see me good. Okay, so now Up here on the wall, I have a whole bunch of story cards. So in this case, I have 2 different product owners. So here's product owner A, those are the orange cards. Here's product owner B, which has a bunch of yellow cards. Okay, so it's also okay for a team to be delivering for multiple product owners. Typically, you create agile teams and you give them a one-to-one, like, hey, this product owner gets this team. But when you start building larger teams, we can absolutely serve multiple product owners. So now that we've written the cards up here and we put the point value, so we have a bunch of smalls, medium, larges, extra larges. We have 8, 16s, 2s, 4s written all over them. Now what we need to do is release planning. Okay, so let's see here. I'm my own cameraman, so bear with me. So now we're going to take these cards and we're going to pull them off the story card wall. We're going to say, all right, we have a 1 week. Here's the first iteration. Can you guys see this okay? Okay. So we have iteration 1. That's a 1 or 2 week sprint. Iteration 2, iteration 3, iteration 4, 5, and 6. Okay. So we're going backwards that way. We don't know for this team what our velocity is going to be. We don't know how many problems we can solve in a sprint. So we're basically going to guess. We're going to say, wow, wouldn't it be great if we could get 10 points done in the first iteration? Maybe we get 10 there. Maybe our team starts to storm and norm and perform better. Now we're going to get 12, 12, 14, 14. So we start off with the best guess and we say, wow, we know that there's only so many story cards that we can get done in a given sprint. So now that we set our goal for 10, now what we need to do is we need to kind of fill it up. So we get the product owners up here and we say, okay, what do you want us to build first? What business value do you want us to deliver first? So we say, well, I'd like to get this extra small card. That's a 1, that's a 4, that's a 5. Oh, and I'd like to get this. Oh, that's an 8. Okay, well, our limit's 10. So now we need to go back to the well, and we need to find something that we think we can do. Now, in this case, we have 2 product owners. So we have 5 for that product owner. So maybe there's the next product owner, they choose another 5. So now, guess what? First sprint, 2 product owners, they're going to get 5 points. They're going to get 5 points. Okay. So we continue to do this. And the product owners are the ones who are initially laying out the product backlog. So Matt, this is in waterfall. You're not building a Gantt chart. You are building a Gantt chart, but you didn't build the Gantt chart. Your business owners did, right? Now that they know the size of things, they can say, geez, I'd rather have 2 extra smalls or 5 extra smalls. Had I known that was an extra large and that would consume the entire sprint, I wouldn't have done it. So you continue to do this, okay? And you continue to stick the cards up here and you continue to play the point value. You don't violate it. Now, don't get me wrong. If you're working in a sprint and you get your 10 points done, you don't stop, right? You pull the next highest value card and you keep going, okay? And again, I'm a big fan of Kanban, bigger fan of Scrum, combining Scrum and Kanban. But yeah, so you go through this, we lay out the plan. So that's step 1, okay? So step 1, and I don't know if you can see it over here, is we're going to take and we're going to have the business owners put the highest value thing first. Okay, I'll just stick it over here so you can see it. So that's step 1. Now that we have the highest value thing, the next thing we're going to do is review dependencies. So once we have the per se Gantt chart up on the wall, now this is when the engineering team takes over. QA, BA, developers, and they're like, yeah, you know what, that's a great plan, but we can't do this one before this one. So can we change this around? Okay. Or we'll look at it and we'll look at other outside team dependencies. We'll say, yeah, you know what? The problem is that these 2 require that we work with another vendor or we work with our infrastructure team. And 4 weeks from now, I know that they don't have any capacity because you actually will bring in these outside teams in here. You'll bring in your infrastructure, your security team when you're doing this release planning. So anybody outside the team that's dependent on delivering business value, they need to come in and say, yeah, that's great, but these cards have security implications and my team's totally consumed for the next 5 sprints and we don't have any capacity to actually support delivering that business value. So what you're doing is instead of like in waterfall when you create these perfect project plan and then you go around and ask everybody if it's good and everybody nods their head, right? You're actually bringing them into the room in front of your business partners saying, is this a valid plan, right? Can you support this ever? And your business partners started realizing, holy crap, I thought I was just asking, Jeff to do something for me. And Jeff had to go and get somebody from security and somebody from infrastructure and somebody from DevOps and they start seeing all the talent that it requires to actually execute and deliver this technology. Okay. And they see everybody having this intelligent discussion about, gee, should this happen first? Should it happen second? This one requires another vendor. This one, it needs security. So it's the power of the conversation. That's why story cards are about conversations. Because if you write it down as if it's just a requirement, is that precise, you're kind of kidding yourself. Okay, because it isn't that precise. It takes a lot of knowledge workers to achieve business value and leverage technology. So that's the whole key to this. So the second thing we just did, right, is we just reviewed dependencies, right? So now the last thing we're going to do is pull risk forward. Okay, so now that we have this plan, this release plan laid out there, we're going to say, all right, well, what's the hardest thing that we need to do on that? And it's like, wow, geez, you know what? We want to ship after 12 weeks, 6 iterations. We actually want to ship, to production. But we're going to do something we've never done before, all the way out in iteration 5. Okay, we're actually going to do an integration with Lean Dog, and we've never worked with Lean Dog before. Or we're going to embrace a new technology into the mix that we've never done. So that's risky. So why don't we take that card, let's flag it as a high risk card, and let's say, well, what can we do to do something riskier sooner? Okay, so we'll start moving cards by risk back in our iteration so that we uncover the highest risk things first. If we wait till iteration 5 and find out that thing was an extra large and we thought it was a medium, right, and it blows up on us, we're screwed. We can't hit our date because it's way more work than we have capacity and time to do. Okay, and I'm sorry, I can't really see the chat window. So
it was a quick question. Earlier, you had mentioned serving multiple product owners, multiple projects for the team. Is there a number you typically try to gate that to, or an optimal? Does it depend on the team?
It depends on the product that you're working on. That's a great question. I've been doing this for a long time, so we've coached just about every kind of product project. We did an SAP implementation with a large company here, and they had 12 people who could configure and modify SAP, and they had 16 product owners that wanted them to modify it. 16, right? Because 16 people needed that system to be configured for them to improve their process and their job. So I don't think there's a limit on product owners at all. It just takes discipline. And the key with that many product owners is, the product owner, so the grooming session. So when you pull the product owners in front of the plan, you're constantly adjusting the plan. And I'll go there in a minute about velocity and how we adapt and adjust. But the key is, like, if those product owners didn't show up for this backlog planning meeting, guess what? Their cards didn't get prioritized. So they learned pretty quickly that, I need to show up and I need to speak to true business value, because with all my colleagues there's 11 people that can do the job and 16 people that want them to do work. And all 16 of them could have consumed them full time. And so they really had to get good at balancing and agreeing as product owners who goes first, second, third. Are we doing round robin? Are we going to come up with a business value scoring process to do that? That's typically what we do, is we'll come up with a good way of determining business value with them. And it's custom per product, but that's a great question. Any other questions about this so far? Okay, so now that we kind of have a release plan, and remember, we guessed on how many points we're going to do. Now we're going to start working, and we're going to work, call it 2-week sprints. Let me pivot you over here. See if you guys can see this. So now we're actually going to calculate velocity. So here's my marker. So over here, we actually have time. So this is iterations. Okay. So this is sprint 1, sprint 2, 3, 4, 5. Over here, we have points: 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. So we worked that first sprint. We got done. We said, hey, how many points, how many cards did we get done? We wanted to get these cards done. There's 10 points here, but we got them all done except for this one. We actually only got 4, 5, 6 points out of 10. Okay. So we go over to the chart and we say, okay, iteration 1, we got 6 points. Okay. So typically when I'm starting with a new team, I like to go 3 sprints before I have an average. So I like to take the amount of points we get done for each sprint, and then I'll have a rolling average of how many points we can predict. But when you're starting, we just guessed at 10. We only got 6 done. Okay. So we got 6 done. So we now said, okay, well, now we need to shift. Try to do this virtually here. We now have to take this card, which we didn't get done, and we have to shift it over here, right? So now we have to take something here because our plate's full, right? And shift this card back. So every sprint, we're going to say based on our current velocity, which cards didn't we get done? You don't get partial credit for cards. That's called hangover, by the way. So when one card hangs over to the next sprint, you can't say, well, geez, we got 50% done, because we're not going back to this hourly percentage game. Okay. We're saying we didn't get done. We couldn't ship it. It doesn't matter if we were 2 hours away from getting it done or 1 hour. We still didn't get it done, because things are always going to kind of fall over to the next iteration. The goal isn't to get everything done and then go home, right? The goal is always be working on everything all the time. So in this case, we're going to swing that card over. So now we go through in that sprint, we got 6. Then the next sprint, we actually got 10. Then we got, hey, we're doing really good now. We got 12. So what we're doing is we're creating a chart, right? That says, here's our velocity. Again, I like to go 3 sprints before I actually think I have an average that's predictable. So as we start adjusting this, and we say, well, okay, we got 6 done here. We actually got 10, then we got 12, right? The point is that at some point, as our team matures, our velocity it can't constantly go up. Right? The car can't keep going faster and faster. We've fixed the people on the team. They're working a hard 40, as transparent as possible. There's only so many problems they can solve in the sprint. So questions about that? I think I lost my Zoom window for some reason. Oh, we good?
Sorry, I took myself off video so I can sneeze.
Oh, no worries.
That out.
Okay, so any questions about that so far?
And we can keep it to the end, but maybe at the end you could give us a thought on, in these COVID times when we don't have everyone's got 6 whiteboards at home.
Yep.
If you have any thoughts on doing this without moving the laptop around, maybe later we can talk about that if you.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, with COVID, we have to embrace technology now. We've been using Mural for a lot of our planning sessions. Most people with this today, everybody's using Jira. Atlassian's kind of ruling the world. They've bought up every software company and integrated with everything. So most people are doing this in a tool. The reason I like the paper and the reason I chose to do this presentation at the boat today is because when you do it like this, there's a physical limitation. It's pretty easy to see that my plate's full. Okay. One of the challenges I have with tools is that the cloud storage is infinite. I can throw a million requirements into a Jira database, right? Or a spreadsheet or something. And so what happens is if you keep taking requests in, people think that you're going to actually get it done. Like, hey, I got my ticket in, I got my requirement in. So eventually I'm going to actually get it. And I really like to do this physical planning with the business because it gives them a sense of sizes and space and capacity. And I'm not violating this 12 or this 10 or this 6, right? That's my predicted speed of problem solving for this team. We hope we'll get better as a team. The business customers are gonna, they watch us do estimation, they watch us do sizing, they watch us do planning, right? Then they're gonna actually hear us do a retrospective and do a show and tell. And I'll come back to that. I'll go back to my slide deck here and I'll explain to you some of the feedback loops that really make this release planning thing work. Okay, you guys see my screen? Good. Okay, so just to recap, I didn't cover this point. So why did we only have the developers do the estimation? Okay, it seems crazy, right? Because in waterfall, you would say, hey, how long does it take to write requirements? How long is it going to take to code it? How long does it take to test it? And then we add up all these individual estimates, and then we actually pad it, right? We say, okay, now I'm actually going to add maybe 30% overhead because we know this isn't precise, right? And then I'm going to hope that we weren't off in our estimates by more than 30%. Okay, that's how most people do waterfall. So in Agile, the developers do it. Okay, why do the developers do it? Remember, we're sizing the work. So typically, okay, the harder it is to code, the harder it was to do everything else. So it's really complex and took a lot of code to write. Okay, then it was probably harder to do the requirements for that code. It's probably harder to test it, right? Because it was more complex. So typically the complexity of the coding effort carries through the size of the problem. Not all the time. I'm not saying sometimes it was really, it was really easy to code, but it was hard to write the requirements, right? But assume that 80% of the time that the size, the amount of the code that we wrote was indicative of the testing effort was, more like the testing effort or the requirements effort. Right now, we have a relative size. Summing up the parts at individual roles of the knowledge workers just doesn't work. There's so much imprecision there. And so that's why we have the developers do it. Now, when we're doing the planning poker, okay, and when we do the flop, QA's in the room, business analysts in the room, when we say, hey, as a user, I want to be able to do this so that I can do this. People, and we're going to talk to our customers like, okay, do you want that to be more like how you do it on Amazon or how you do it on eBay or on PayPal, right? There's so many ways we could solve, we can make that experience happen. And so by having everybody in the room, design thinking folks, testers, everybody talking about the testing complexity, that's all valid, right? Everybody can talk about that so we understand the scope. And we'll write down sometimes on the back of the card what the acceptance criteria is. So, okay, wow, when we had that conversation about this on the back of the card, write down, okay, yeah, and it has to happen within, a half a second. And, and the field needs to be masked and this. So we'll write some of the acceptance criteria we talked about when we came up with how big or small that problem was. Okay. Another thing that I want to mention is when you do this velocity chart, you can't compare points across teams, right? So for example, if one team working on an SAP system has an extra large card is worth 16 and an 8 and 4, you can't compare that team's velocity to another team's velocity because they're different people, they're different technologies, and they solve problems differently as a team. Okay, so that's one of the biggest mistakes I see is people take velocity and they're like, well, geez, this team's better than that team because they're going faster. No, they have different people on their team. They some of them are more mature teams and collaborative teams than others. Some are they're all probably using they all have different skills and different technologies that they're embracing to do it. They have different product owners that they're working with, right, to even do this. So you really can't compare points across teams. Again, here's the Fibonacci method, I think, Kevin, you alluded to. Yeah, I don't know, 20, 40, 13. I think it was great for a book, I'd be honest. Release planning. I mentioned this already. I just want to recap, right? We apply our velocity, we review dependencies, we're pulling value forward, pulling risk forward. There's a thing called spikes in Agile where you basically, let's say that we were going to do that one hard card in iteration 5, and we wanted to pull it forward, and we said, okay, rather than actually doing the card with Lean Dog, right, and moving the work up, what if we just did a test? What if we wrote what we call a spike, call it R&D? I'm just going to do a hello world. I'm going to send something to Lean Dog and get it sent back, and I'm going to throw it away. But now that I've done that, and I know that we can communicate with them and get stuff back, right, I feel better about that risk coming up later in the plan. So those are called spikes. Spike cards are basically R&D. Wow, when we did the estimation, we weren't sure. These cards were really hard to size because they're doing something in Ruby, and we've never done anything with Ruby. So maybe Kevin should go play with Ruby for a while and write something simple, and then come back and say, yeah, you know what, Ruby is pretty easy, and I think we could embrace that skill pretty quickly. So I think that's about the right size for the card. So that would be an example of a spike. You went off to learn something. Okay. Check my time here. All right.
About 15 minutes. Hey, there's a little bit of side chatter. I don't know if you wanted to talk about it.
Sure.
Even going back to the comment of a team working on multiple projects at the same time, developer, having two projects to go back and forth on. The question that keeps coming to my head every time I'm reading comments is, when you're planning and I've got the development staff, sizing things, but then stakeholders being present, and doesn't it make that aspect of things much more complex? And I've got, twice the stakeholders, or I would have to do some of this at the same time, right, in order to get a good picture of what I can try to do in a sprint.
Yes, that's a great question. So if you have multiple product owners, that you're not going to, you'll do separate sizing sessions with them, right? So you're not going to make one product owner what just size the work for another product owner. So the Scrum Master, iteration manager will facilitate, hey, let's bring product owner A in, let's estimate their backlog. Now we're going to have another meeting with product owner B, and we're going to estimate their backlog. So the estimation and sizing, we will not do that. Like, all the product owners don't have to be in the room. The release planning is when we need the multiple product owners in the room, because now we have one team. We don't care. I tell people, I got a degree in engineering. I love applying technology to solve business value. I don't care who I make happy, right? I just want to do the best thing for the company. So the product owners can fight out who gets capacity from this team, right? We have a fixed team. They can, in fact, it's really great because when you do it this way, you learn so much more about the business, because the product owners are up there talking about, hey, why do I need this business value? And it's, well, why do you need your business value? And when they're having that discussion in front of the whole team, that's conversation, and not the whole team usually doesn't get to hear, right? Usually it's like, oh, some BA went off the right requirements, and they understand the business value because they were talking to the product owner. Now the product owners are standing in front of the entire team, and they're saying, I want this because of this, and this is more important than this, and this is more important than that. And that motivates the team, because now they're actually looking at their customers. It's not like they had this Gantt chart that the project manager made up for them. The whole team made up the Gantt chart, right? And so that now there's a passion. We better deliver on our promises. We just have this very transparent conversational thing with our product owners. We're looking them in the face. We're telling them if something's big or small. We're telling them, if that's in the right order. So the accuracy of your whole plan is so much better because you're doing it in front of your business owners. And I'll tell you, it's not often that that we coach teams with multiple product owners. I'd say it's more the rare occasion. Most people we go into, they might have a team with one or two product owners, maybe one, but it's rare that we have like a SAP implementation with 16. So, and that's a good question. Yeah, and thank you. I'm having trouble being a cameraman and watching.
No worries.
Questions.
Julie, Greg, Connor, does that help? Take that as a yes.
Okay, so I mentioned velocity. I just want to kind of recap a couple of things I talked about. So the other important part of this is the ceremonies that we have. If I had extra time, I could go through these, but basically you close out a 1 or 2 week iteration by doing a show and tell. So you pull the entire team into a room and you demonstrate working software. So you bring your product owners in, your entire team in. We're done with our 2 week sprint. We got 6 points done in our first iteration. Now we're actually going to demonstrate the working software. So we're going to pull up on a big screen or TV, and we're actually going to demonstrate what we actually built. Okay, and this is really important because it motivates the team. It's the last opportunity for the product to say, "Yep, we love it. We've already showed it to some of our customers, and we're excited for them to get it." It also it gives everybody a sense of seeing the whole. Because often in software development, and particularly even in COVID times, you're working on your thing. I'm working on my story card, but I didn't get to see the other 5 story cards that got done in that sprint. So for me to see what Kevin did and Jeff did and Amy did, right, as coworkers, and actually demonstrate that in front of the customer is extremely important. We were working with a large paint company here in Cleveland, and we were doing show and tells. We were working on a global product for them, and they were so proud of the work that we were delivering that we would do show and tells for hundreds of people. They would have their entire sales team from around the globe be able to dial in to watch that show and tell in a big theater. And we were getting videos sent from the field. Like they would go out to like a paint, automotive paint paint supplier, and they would shoot videos of happy users using the product. Right? Somewhere in Chinese, somewhere in Indian. So we couldn't always understand what they were saying in the video, but the folks in the field that were actually taking releases of our software started sending in customer delight videos to motivate the team that, hey, what you're building is truly having an impact to our customers. So show and tells are powerful. It's a positive, it should be a positive time to kind of brag about what you did, for everybody to see all the awesome work you did and to celebrate it. Okay. So now that we've done the show and tell, we're going to look at our velocity. We're going to update our velocity chart and say, hey, we got 6 points done. We got 10 points done. And we're going to adjust our predicted velocity based on what we did. We aren't going to look for hero moments. There's a saying in Agile that, this is pre-global warming, that, yesterday's weather, that, it's not, if we only got 10 points, we aren't going to get 20 in the next sprint. We aren't going to get 40. Like, don't expect a miracle to happen. That team worked a hard 40. They worked as transparently as they could to deliver software. So I know that we wish we were going faster, but yesterday's weather, the velocity the number of problems we were able to solve for whatever reason in the last couple sprints, that's indicative of the speed at which we're solving problems. So if you're looking for hero moments, if you don't like this velocity, and there's a great video I'm gonna refer to at the very end of this talk that everybody here should watch. It's the #1 Agile video in the world that does a great job of explaining velocity, product ownership, Scrum, Kanban. I'll try to get to that. So now that we've done that, now we're going to do a retrospective. So the retrospective is simply what worked, what didn't work. We put Post-it notes up on the wall. We say, this went really well, this didn't go so well, and we kind of do that. And we do that with our product owners too. We could say things like, geez, you know what? I needed to work with Amy. She was a product owner for these cards, but when we went to actually work on them, Amy wasn't around. So we actually went to do the work and we couldn't get a hold of Amy because she was out with a customer. And that meant when we actually did the work, we actually didn't get it right the first time. So it's okay to talk about in the retrospective, how's our relationship with the business? What's working, what's not working, right, as a team. Now that we've done that, we're going to update our target velocity. We're going to pull the cards and adjust the plan, right? And then people are going to sign up and we're going to start the next sprint. So those are the Scrum ceremonies, super fast. I think that one of the keys to this is the product owners is 100% engaged with the story card writing, the prioritization, reviewing the work, the show and tells. I think one of the biggest challenges when you go Agile is that, the product owners don't realize how much more work is on them. Okay, we've shifted a lot of the work to the business, that they're just as accountable for our outcomes, that they need to be in the room with us. They need to attend these ceremonies. They need to watch us create a Gantt chart, right? And see how complex it is to do that. And they need to gain appreciation for what we do. Okay. This is the video I was going to mention. It's called Agile Product Ownership in a Nutshell by Henrik Nieberg. Let me hit play just so you can see it real quick. So jot that down. That's about a 15-minute video. It's got millions of views. Most companies we go to, this video gets shipped around to all the executives, and it explains quite a bit about how you fix the team, how you feed work in based on business value. It talks a lot about different velocity charts and how you fix time, fix scope, variable time, variable scope. So he does a great job of explaining different types of velocity metrics, and I highly recommend it. So we're getting very close to the end here on time.
Yeah, we have just a few minutes left. There are a couple of questions. I don't know how much slide where you at.
Okay, that's it.
That's it. Oh, great. No. So there is a question from Linda about unfinished stories. How do you handle them? Does it bounce around a little bit? What do you do with things that you would call it hangover? It's always part of the process. How do you handle the unfinished work?
Yeah. So again, once we get like 2 or 3 sprints done, we're just working on a rolling average of our velocity. Okay. We're not predicting our velocity is that precise. So the fact that we're always going to have cards hang over, that's just going to keep happening. And so that's just built into the fact that if it was precise and we were just going to only do the cards that we planned, and then if we get them done, everybody goes home. No, we're all getting paid to keep working. We're all going to keep working. So things are going to keep rolling from sprint. And when you start blending out your velocity is like an average over 3 or 4 sprints, it doesn't matter. Again, I'm going to push you guys to study Kanban. We have a free Agile Explain class next week at Lean Dog. But I like Kanban because I like cycle time better than velocity personally, because I think it's a continual measurement versus where with Scrum you establish your velocity every 2 weeks and you keep averaging it out. Where cycle time is an ongoing, continual thing in Kanban. I like Scrum and I like Kanban. I like Scrumban. I like the ceremonies of Scrum. I like Kanban because it's actually, I think, more precise than Scrum. There's more metrics. There's more limits. But that's a different talk. What other questions we have?
Does anyone else have any? That's a lot of it. There was a lot of side chat on the context switching, prioritization of the work if you got different projects going on, things like that. On a personal note, I don't know if anyone has also attended John's week-long, what were you calling it? Agile waterboarding.
Yeah.
But I highly recommend it. It was definitely worth. The price was right too.
Yeah, it's free. It's next week. Yeah, you can go to Lean Dog resources training. It's called Agile Explain Online. It's 2.5 hours a day. We cover everything from, Agile to Scrum to Kanban to DevOps, design thinking, testing, engineering, you name it.
I've tried myself a number of times and it's fantastic. I always end up getting meetings scheduled at work, but and have to be at meetings, but I've participated on and off, but it's fantastic. Really appreciate it, John. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, with that, well, Jeff, you look like you're on the verge.
Yeah, just very quickly, as John mentioned, he's got that. I'm going to be sending out to everybody an announcement about that, announcement of other training classes. We got something from Project Brilliant this morning about some things that are going on. So I'm going to be trying to send that out to everybody, not only in Pitt Agile, but who have signed up for this particular conference. And, just again, man, there's so much out there. And I know that there's a lot on people's plate, but if you can take advantage of some of these things, as you can see, I mean, I've been getting feedback that these sessions have been real helpful to everybody. And John, this is another one. So kudos.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just put on the chat a Agile Explain class note there. So yeah, please go to that.
Right.
I also, with that side chatter, where I threw up a book that's on Amazon. It's like 99 cents on Kindle today. It's by former General Stanley McChrystal. And again, great discussion on how building teams that are consistent really move things forward.
Good.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right. Well, with that, John, we really, really appreciate your time and expertise. Everyone else, you've got about 9 minutes to take care of business, and no, you don't, because Jeff's got one more.
The survey on the site.
I'm sorry. Thank you. There is a survey. If you go back over to Whova, you'll see
a button. Rate this session.
There you go. You can go in, take it. Please do. That helps everyone out quite a bit on this. Again, the session recording will be posted on Whova as well.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye, everybody.